Well, it was worse than we expected, and we knew quite a bit based on leaks and on admissions from negotiators, mainly from other countries. There are a couple of places where I was shocked to see that actually the TPP actually rolls back what was extremely modest progress that congressional Democrats had forced on President Bush for his last set of agreements. Three specific things. One, in the area of access to affordable medicines, the TPP's rules on patents, actually both for developing countries but also for us, would roll back that initial reform and make medicine more expensive in pretty dramatic ways. Number two, the investor-state dispute resolution system is actually expanded out in ways we should discuss so that more kinds of laws can be attacked and many more companies would be able to attack U.S. laws. And then the third thing that was kind of a shocker is there is an expansion of the kind of attacks you can have on food safety, on imported food safety, which is really serious because Malaysia and Vietnam, two of the TPP countries, are amongst the major importers of seafood and shrimp. A lot of their stuff gets stopped now for being unsafe, but this agreement would give them new rights to basically attack our stopping their stuff for food safety purposes and flood us with unsafe imports.
And Lori, on that food safety issue, what's the potential effect on the United States, which obviously has a long-term and pretty well-developed food safety system?
Well, I think it's very telling that yesterday the agribusiness industry was the only major industry that was extremely enthusiastic when the text came out. And they said, wow, we got these great ways to stop these food safety attacks on our imports. Well, they're thinking of trying to jam our GMO foods into other countries. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander, which means the same rules could mean that imports, particularly of, I don't know how to put this because people are probably having breakfast, but in Vietnam particularly, there's a huge issue of farmed shrimp being farmed in pools that, among other things, are fertilized with human poop. Can't put it another way. And then lots of antibiotics are poured into the ponds before the harvest to deal with the diseases that come from the human waste. So we've got some really unsafe products. Right now, we only inspect a small percentage, but we over-inspect for countries like Vietnam because we know they're big problems. One of the new rules I was surprised to see is you can challenge the inspection, both the way you sample, how you decide to pick at a particular country because they have problems, but also you have limits on how you can do testing, how long you can hold the product. I mean, practically, what does it mean? The TPP could mean poisonous food that you can't label from what country it comes from on your kids' plates. It could mean major public health issues. This is an agreement that for advocates like 350.org who are fighting climate change, as is Sierra Club and the others, is catastrophic in that it would require us, it would basically reverse our current policies that allow us to stop the export of natural gas, liquid natural gas, so that we would basically be exporting a lot of carbon-based fuels against a sustainable, non-carbon future economy, and we would lose a lot of the energy and other policy tools we need to combat the climate crisis. So if you're working just in a particular species, you may think you may have been sold this is a great deal, and you don't know the net effect. The vast majority of environmental groups are leading the campaign against the TPP because, just as an example, one of the other shocking things in the agreement is George Bush's trade agreements, they were bad. They had the agreements enforcing 7 specific multilateral environmental agreements so that actually those were the environmental standards that were to be enforced by all of the countries. They had to adopt and maintain and enforce those standards in their laws. Here is this new agreement, and it wipes out 6 of the 7 agreements. There's only 1 agreement that's enforceable anymore, so there are no standards in the environmental standards part of the standards in the chapter on environment. So with these groups, on the foreign policy front, this is, sort of the expected. The Council on Foreign Relations is a cheerleader for all of these agreements. They're going to make this argument that somehow this will help us contain China. It's sort of a strange argument. It's unclear what the good strategy for that is. That's the usual argument you hear when actually the argument about jobs fails. The bottom line with TPP, which we knew before, is it will make it easier to offshore American jobs, and it will push down our wages by putting Americans into competition. with folks in Vietnam who make less than 65 cents an hour. We knew that before. Now we know all this additional bad stuff.
Lori, I wanted to ask you, some groups came out against the agreement that you don't usually associate with trade deals, like Doctors Without Borders and Human Rights Watch. Could you talk about their concerns?
Yes. So Doctors Without Borders, which basically, as everyone knows, is a major humanitarian group, is extremely concerned about what would happen with medicine prices. And this gets to the language I'd mentioned, where I was shocked to see rollbacks of previous reforms that the Bush administration had made. So Big Pharma got a lot of goodies in this agreement. In a free trade agreement, we see new monopoly protections for Big Pharma. And so Doctors Without Borders is basically pointing out that in a whole smorgasbord of policies where Big Pharma was trying to use the TPP, the good name of free trade, to put into place a bunch of new protections and privileges to raise medicine prices, they got their way. And the two biggest ones are, which is shocking rollbacks from the old U.S. trade standard, which was bad, is all the developing countries in TPP, including countries that are really poor like Vietnam, ultimately have to have the same extreme patent standards, extreme exclusivities that will just price people out of medicine.
Well, Lori, where do we go from here? Obviously, there will soon be a 90-day period for Congress to vote on the fast tracking of this bill. The protests are already being called for in Washington, D.C., and the president, whose presidency was largely crippled by the Republicans in Congress for the past 7 years, will now depend on the Republican majority to get the votes necessary to pass this.
So yesterday, the president gave official notice of intent to enter the agreement. That starts the first 90-day clock. So ostensibly, by the first week of February, the TPP could be signed. Then the next question, though, and the most important thing for all of us to think about, is it only becomes reality if Congress approves it. Now, we are behind the 8 ball because we've got fast track, so no amendments, et cetera. However, by 5 votes only did fast track pass. That means if 5 members of Congress, looking at that text and knowing it's not what they were promised, that it would offshore more American jobs, it would push down our wages, it would flood us with unsafe food and raise medicine prices. If we have 5 members in the House of Representatives who say, oh no, that is not what I signed up for, that's the end of TPP. So our mission basically is knowing there will be a huge push for a vote early in the spring, and that this very day, the White House has fanned out across the country with cabinet secretaries. They're up on the Hill trying to break arms, get members of Congress to say, oh, I'll be for this thing. We need to do the same thing on behalf of the public, on behalf of the jobs, wages, environment, food safety that our families rely on. And we can get our members of Congress, we only need to move 5, to vote no. That's the end of the TPP. And we can do this. And we have brothers and sisters in the other TPP countries who are doing the same thing. Together, our goose is not cooked. We can still make sure the TPP bad future is not ours, but we're going to have to talk to our members of Congress, and we need to start now. And next week is a congressional recess. So members of Congress will be back in the district. Look on their websites. They frequently have open houses. You can just go. They work for you. And if there isn't an open house, you call and make an appointment. It is really simple. Go to tradewatch.org, has all the materials, information from way into the weeds analysis. There is an analysis team that has put together by chapter yesterday the bullets you need to know on each of these details, but also how to do a congressional meeting. Grab a couple of your friends and your family. Go tell your member of Congress you need that commitment. We can stop this.